You're welcome. We're on item 13, ordinance 143475. This is an ordinance amending Title 1, Chapter 9A, Section 4 of the Oak Lawn Village Code pertaining to the powers and duties of the village manager. May I have a motion on item 13,
Motion
please?
approved.
Properly moved by trustee Carberry,
Second.
seconded by trustee Desmond. Any discussion on this item?
Yes, Mayor.
Bob?
Thank you. At the last board meeting, which was on November 11th, I stated that for over a year now that I have expressed concerns about the village manager entering into service contracts without board approval. Now, the village manager routinely and unilaterally enters into contracts encumbering the taxpayers of Oak Lawn. I believe the problem with this unchecked government spending is that sooner or later you run out of other people's money. As elected officials of Oak Lawn, we are entrusted with the responsibility to oversee this government. The village attorney recently informed me that there is clear ambiguity in the village code regarding service contracts. At that meeting, I specifically asked that three ordinances be added to the agenda for, that would be tonight's meeting, limiting the manager's spending authority, which would essentially provide for greater ethics and transparency. On Thursday, November 20th, Trustee Quinlan and I requested that these ordinances be placed on tonight's agenda. The village manager sent an email indicating that our request was too late to be placed on the agenda. So too late to consider an ordinance limiting this manager's spending authority. But to my surprise and disappointment, when I received tonight's agenda, I found the ordinance that we're addressing right now, and that is an ordinance expanding the manager's spending authority. Given the lack of fiscal accountability that we have witnessed this past year, there's no question that this is an assault and an insult to the people of Oak Lawn and to the principle of greater ethics and transparency. So what I would like to know is which two trustees, Mr. Manager, asked that this item be placed on the agenda?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, trustee Carberry.
Yeah, if I could respond. I actually,
Please.
Bob, after your comments, they seemed very reasonable at our last meeting. So I called our attorneys and our village manager, and similar to what you said, the answer was the same, that there needed to be, and actually the verbiage is, it's a very simple change, but we needed to make a change to it to include services. And we had a legislative meeting. It was posted. You were welcome to attend. And you could have, you could have your input. But actually, you're the one that drove this, and you're the reason we're doing it. Obviously, a town this size, we have to have, our village manager has to be entrusted to, there's emergencies, they have to be able to procure services. And we can't have an emergency meeting every time there's an issue. You have to have the ability to operate the village. So that's what we agreed on. I would have loved for you to have been there. You can go to there, if you have something you want to put on the agenda for our next meeting, by all means. But you're the reason we're voting on this tonight.
Madam Mayor, may I?
Yes, trustee Olenichek.
And that's just for clarity. Excuse me, Alex.
That's-
It was just to give a little clarity. And what's the verbiage change in here?
We added the word services, right?
You
Yes.
added the word services, which, just to give it a little, some clarity. But I feel, and I hope the rest of the board feels, that our village manager of a town this size deserves the ability to procure services, to run the town. You can't have an emergency meeting every time we have to get it approved.
Okay, thank you. Are you done, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay, Alex?
Madam Mayor, on the history, going back to my notes of being on the village board, on Tuesday, March 14th, if you check the village board meeting minutes, you'll find that we had an ordinance that actually went from limiting the village manager spending, the interpretation of president of board at that time was if it was over $500 and limited to it. The recommendation of staff at the board was to increase it to $20,000. And Trustee Strite was a member of the board at that time and voted to increase the ability for the village manager to go up to the $20,000 level. Now, in that time between 2006 and now, we've had many different things that have happened, from microbursts that have come through the village, in which the village manager had to make decisions on public safety and be able to provide services that were well over, 10, 15, and pushing $20,000. To in one of the trustees' district, there was a water main that broke on a very difficult winter night that jeopardized the water to the neighborhood and also our complete water system, that there had to be decisions that were made. And that is why the village manager has the ability to do that in running a municipality this size. And by the way, at that time, the person on staff making the recommendation was to put the village into line with what the state code stated. So again, we're going through the positioning of a certain trustee that it was 2006 up to now is okay, but now there's something that's moving forward on it. So now there's going to be a contrived controversy because of something that he perceives as being bad, which he voted for 2006.
Okay.
Mayor, I'd like to respond, but I understand other trustees would like to make comments, but I'd like to have an opportunity to respond to those.
You can
I
go
do that?
ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, one of the things that is driving my recommendation is, first of all, the village manager has authorized millions of dollars in spending to be spent fighting with our firefighters. And I don't think that's ever been really a discussion that we've had amongst this board. The village manager allowed Hamilton Partners to select the broker for the 111th Street, 111th and Cicero property, and those brokerage fees will be paid for by the taxpayers of Oak Lawn. That was never anything that came before this board. There was a tollway landscaping project at 95th Street in the tollway, $19,300. That never came before this board. And I could go on and on and on. There's all kinds of things. And these are not emergencies. These are things that, quite frankly, there would be plenty of time to bring these before the board to have a discussion. But this board, I think the manager has, I suppose, has the tacit support or approval by the members. I know Trustee Carberry suggests that he needs that spending authority, but I would really challenge whether or not he knows exactly what is spent on a regular basis without any discussion. Now, maybe you have a discussion with the manager. I know that is not something that I have. So I think in the name of ethics and transparency, to say that we have to do this on an emergency basis. These are not emergencies. These are things that the public has a right to know. And I think many of these things, I don't think that we want the public to know that we're spent $19,300 for landscaping at 95th and the tollway. Or I don't think we want the public to know that a 911 memorial that was supposed to be funded with private donations, that $35,000 was taken from the drug confiscation fund and used to pay for the granite at the memorial. That never came before the board. And when the Justice Department said, "Wait a minute, no, this is not. You cannot spend this money," then the village just put it on the agenda and passed it. So
It would have been nice to hear these concerns at our committee meetings, Trustee Straight.
Madam Mayor, when the trustee's done, I'd like to rebut.
We have Trustee Warder next, and then I'll go back to you.
Well, I just a little bit confused, Bob. You voted to authorize the $20,000 expenditure back in 2006. Okay, when we were going through a period of upheaval here, there was a total different administration that won the election, took control. We went through a whole series of village managers, I think 3, okay, within a 2-year period of time. But during that period of time, you extend $20,000 in purchasing authorizations to that village manager. So I don't know what's changed, other than we have a professional village manager now who's spending this money, okay? So,
What's changed,
Trustee Olenichek has the floor after Trustee Porter. So,
Well,
are you done, Trustee
yes,
Porter?
I'm done.
Thank you. And if you'd like to be recognized by the chair, please go through the chair. Thanks.
Madam President, just by what Trustee Straight said, millions fighting the firefighters, that was unauthorized. Well, the village manager serves at the direction of the board. There's documentation to prove that, again, that's another fallacy and false statement by Trustee Bob Straight,
Let's not name names, please.
by the
at
trustee
board
sitting to
table.
my left. The, talking about the 911 memorial, and what a beautiful memorial to the people who lost their lives in 911, but going to that, when you have a confiscation fund that sits there with hundreds of thousands of dollars of money, that all recollection and all legal direction was that money could be used for it, and then when it was put up, was told on a reversal of that. I don't think it was a bad investment by the Village of Oak Lawn to go ahead and spend that. Even in his own words, he said that it came for board approval. So you have to watch the wordsmithing of what certain trustees are going to be saying, especially with things coming up in the future, and how they want to deceive you with what they're saying. And that's a very big concern of mine.
Mayor?
Trustee Quinlan.
I just wanted to say, given the concerns, I think it would be reasonable, and I do think it's reasonable in an emergency situation that the village manager is able to hire services. So can we just amend it to say in an emergency situation?
Okay, we have a motion to amend. Is there a second?
Could we limit it to $10,000?
Well,
Okay,
what,
we have a motion to amend for emergency situations only. Do I have a second on that?
I'll amend it to under $10,000 then.
Okay, we have a motion to amend to emergency situations and under $10,000. Do we have a second?
Yes, second.
Okay, any discussion?
what would constitute an emergency?
Well, certainly not, tollway landscape.
Well, we're not talking about tollway landscaping, we're talking about emergencies.
Okay,
When-
well,
Okay,
A
let's
water
address
main break.
concerns through the
A
chair.
water
Let's
main
not have
break.
back and
A
forth,
water main
please.
break that's going to cost 15,000, so we have to convene the board to approve that.
Okay,
If houses are being flooded, we have to wait until we convene everybody up here and then approve it.
To approve it.
Trustee Quinlan, please address your concerns through the chair. Trustee Desmond, you still have the floor.
Well, no, we're discussing this motion.
I know, but it has to be through the chair. We're not going to have what happened
Okay.
last meeting, please. Thank you. Trustee Strite, you were next, and then Trustee
okay,
Quinlan.
well, a couple of points that I want to make is that, Trustee Border has to go back to 2006 to create the narrative to make this work for him. That's 8 years ago, Trustee. And quite frankly, the difference 8 years ago was that the ordinance was for goods and service, goods and just for goods. It was not for services. Yes, it was.
it's
And-
vague. I think that's the opinion of the attorney.
No, it isn't. No, that's why the attorney said, no, the attorney said clearly, that's why he proposed, or you proposed, that they make this amendment. It's not. There was no provision for services. The idea where the manager has the authority to spend the money was because he is the administrative manager of the village, and that idea is to give him the authority to, let's say, if something does go wrong in an emergency, that, let's say a copier breaks down, they can go out and buy a copier. It was never intended to be entering into contracts that this manager has routinely done. And the contracts are extensive. If we went through, this didn't go on back in 2006. It goes on today on an extensive basis. So I think it's a reasonable it's a reasonable request to amend it down to $10,000 for an emergency. But there would be no, if there was a, certainly if there was a water main break, that really, while the cost of going out and sending the guys out, the crews out to make the repairs, that may cost over, $10,000. That's not really part of the restriction. It's really about the pipes and the materials, which would not be over $10,000. It's all about labor. So I think it's reasonable. It's a fair suggestion. And I would ask the mayor to please call the question.
The village manager said he'd like to weigh in.
Thank you, President and Board. Trustee Carberry is absolutely correct as far as the process that was followed and done in the sunshine, publicly noticed. In anticipation of that meeting and the subject matter, the agenda is available to the media, available to the general public on our website, etc. I contacted 3 groups that would be considered model groups to look at issues like this. The National Civic League, based in Denver, Colorado, Sterling Codifiers, which codifies codes for municipalities across the United States, and then the International City Management Association, which represents professionals like myself in the business, and thousands of managers in municipalities across the world, not just in the United States. The language that is before you is consistent with well-managed model communities that have these codes. And it includes goods, services. The operative word is services. I didn't invent it. It is common practice today in 2014 to have codes that have that language. And that's how nearby municipalities such as Naperville manage their purchasing function. Some communities, the number is 35,000, 50,000. I told the Legal and Legislative Committee I saw no need to raise that amount, although it has not been updated by cost of living since 2006. But usually that would reflect a more robust economy. And during this period of time, we all know we've had a national recession, so I didn't see any need to raise that amount. The other misconstrued or wordsmithing, I think Trustee Olenichuk was absolutely correct. It's sad. This is not the village manager going out and spending willy-nilly money over and above your budget. Read the rest of the ordinance. It's clear. It is already budgeted line item, lump sum dollars in the budget, and I take my lead from well-qualified managers, whether they're in public works, engineering, finance, police, fire, etc. They're the ones that manage their own individual budgets, and they have these needs that come up through the course of doing business. Now, there are occasions where I do too. And in the past, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, read your tills. Every Friday you get a trustee information letter. I informed the board. The board was aware if we had to hire an appraiser. For example, right now, there's a demand by a trustee to have certain property appraised. Okay, do I have to come to the board, okay, and state the multiple pricing and bring the appraisers under this ordinance, go out and we use different appraisers, we use different engineers, we use different financial consultants, we use Grun & Grun for the Hamilton project, we use Cambridge partners, but the board seems to forget that, certain members forget that, because that was in your package when we hired Cambridge partners to appraise the value of purchasing the Kmart lease that was on the dirt owned by J.C. Penney at what is now known as Mariano's and Stony Creek Promenade. That went before this board. It did not go on the agenda. It was in your till. Everybody knew about it, and that practice has been ongoing. It's just good practice to run an organization with language like this, period.
Okay, thank you, Larry. So I want to just circle back and get everyone oriented. What we're voting on is an amendment to item 13 on our agenda, which would restrict the amount from 20,000 to 10,000 and would also be on an emergency basis only. So we had a motion and a second and discussion. I'm going to call the vote on that modified ordinance, the amended ordinance. So not as it appears on our sheet, but as amended.
Trustee Carberry?
No.
Trustee Vorder?
No.
Trustee Streit?
Yes.
Trustee Quinlan?
Yes.
Trustee Oliniechek?
No.
Trustee Desmond?
No.
Okay,
Motion failed 4-2.
thank you. So, yeah, now we have a motion to approve pending on item 13 as written on our agenda this evening. We had a motion and a second and discussion, and I'm going to call the vote on that item.
Could I, Mayor, I'd like to propose an amendment to the ordinance, and that would, I would like to add that we require a public bidding process for any new or reoccurring contracts with the village, in which the village is entering into.
Okay, we have a motion to amend. Again, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion here? Again, we're voting on item 13 as amended just now by the trustee in District 3. Let's call the vote.
Trustee Carberry?
No.
Trustee Vorder?
No.
Trustee Streit?
Yes.
Trustee Quinlan?
Yes.
Trustee Oliniechek?
No.
Trustee Desmond?
No.
Motion fails 4-2.
Okay, so we're back to item 13 as it appears on the agenda. We had a proper motion and a second and discussion, and I'm going to call the vote on this as it appears on our agenda.
Trustee Carberry?
Yes.
Trustee Vorder?
Yes.
Trustee Streit?
No.
Trustee Quinlan?
No.
Trustee Oliniechek?
Yes.
Trustee Desmond?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-2.
Thank you.